Hello, everybody. It is Saturday afternoon. Usually I have this done on Friday, but it's hard to believe that this time last week I was on the Minnesota border in Grand Forks, North Dakota, there with the great church there. We had a District Connect meeting on Saturday afternoon, and then I stayed over and was at Grand Forks. And then we headed out and made our way all across along the Canadian border and zigzagging a little, but up on the north side of the region. And today I am sitting in Pastor Mike Hantz's office at the Valley Community Church of God here in Kalispell, Montana. Again, up near Canada and Idaho, right up in the corner, the northwest corner of Montana and the north central region. So I have, Sanj and I have done a lot of traveling this week, and I was hoping to stay in touch with you every day with a little blog as we work through our questions, our diagnostic questions, but I'm a little behind on my blogs. You'll have to bear with me. I tried to make every day count, and so I was in front of a lot of pastors and had a lot of meetings and a lot of miles. And so anyway, we're in Kalispell today and wanted to visit with you for just a minute with the Saturday briefing to our pastors. And I send this out to the lead pastors in the region, the precious brothers and sisters that I serve here. But it goes out on my blog, and I send them an attachment. I'm going to send you two. I'm going to send you the update of today's briefing. And it has the next 7 questions on the 29 bosses that I talked to you about last week. And so I've got the next 7, and I've also got important dates that are coming up. And I want to remind you of the Allen O. Hathaway Memorial Offering. We're working toward raising the funds, $23,000 to put a new roof on our Livingston Church, which is out here in Montana, down on the south side of Montana. And then next week, we also have the regional prayer call. And so that date and time is there. And I'll be sending you guys the login information to share with your constituency as well. And then there's some birthdays and anniversaries of our ministerial team, anniversaries of their credentialing and things like that. And so I'll send that out. And I'm also going to send you an attachment of the regional prayer calendar. Just in case it got under the radar for you, we try to send it out and post it on our different social media pages. But I'm going to send you a personal copy and just remind you, we hear people say, I do nothing to hurt them. Well, that's nice, but it's even nicer to do something to help people. And so I want to encourage brothers and sisters, I want to encourage you to take a look at the prayer calendar. And on the day, like today, it's Bowdle, South Dakota. That's Brother and Sister Vetch in their congregation. And maybe on the day, minimally pray for them, call their name in prayer, but also pick up the phone, give them a shout out, or text them, or put something on their Facebook page, and just let them know that they're not alone and that you're thinking of them and praying for them. So let's encourage one another, or as one of the verses in the Bible says, provoke people towards good works. And so let's encourage each other to run to win. But anyway, those are a few things that I'll be sending out to you today, pastors. But by way of maybe a devotional thought that I'd like to leave with you today, I have 2 real quick. I'll try to not keep you long today. I know it's by the time you get this, it'll be Saturday afternoon, or you may even get this over the weekend, over Sunday or Monday. But a few days ago, I marked, or a couple weeks now, but I marked the 5th anniversary of being in administrative work. Sanj and I left the pastorate after almost 36 years, if I remember right. I should have done my math, but anyway, well into our 4th decade of pastoral ministry at the local church, and we went into administrative work. And so I've been doing this for 5 years now. It's hard to believe that 5 years has gone by since 2015. And I'm definitely not a pro in administrative work, but I do now have a little bit of a track record, and I've learned some lessons. And one has just really come to mind as I have observed and worked with and served pastors, people, the ministers. And one thing I've learned is that shepherding shepherds is a little different than shepherding sheep. And one way that I have noticed this, I have often, my philosophy as a pastor was that we minister most effectively through our own wounds. If you think about Jesus, even in his glorified body, Thomas said, unless I see the nail prints, the cut in his side, I'm not going to believe it's really Jesus. And so Jesus went to heaven, and he's in his glorified body, he still has the marks of his crucifixion. He took them with him. He ministers to us. By his stripes we are healed. And so we minister most effectively through our wounds. But I want to change that a little bit, because there's a difference between wounds and scars. Wounds, sometimes we think about Jesus, his wounds as being like the stigmata, I think is how you say it. And there's people that is really kind of, wacky's not the word, but just really unusual, that people so identify somehow with the crucifixion that they literally bleed. We call that the stigmata in their wrist or hands and their feet. And they identify so much with the suffering of Christ. But that's not what Thomas was looking for, the bleeding wounds of Jesus. Jesus was in his glorified body. He did not have stigmata. He did not have bleeding wounds. He had the marks, the scars left, where you could see that he had indeed been crucified. And there's a difference between ministering as a wounded person and ministering as a scarred person. When you still have your wounds, there hasn't been healing. When you have scars, you say, I was wounded, but I worked through it. I processed it. And I've seen a lot of pastors that they're ministering from their woundedness, not from their healing. And there's a world of difference. And when you're wounded, you're on guard. You're not able to, you're hurting, and you're not able to completely have an open heart. I believe it was Jensen Franklin that wrote a book, Love Like You've Never Been Hurt Before. But when you're still wounded, you can't do that. You have to work through your woundedness yourself and get healed. You have to say, hey, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to expect to get hurt in life. Church, it's like Christians are like somebody that's near a fire. They're not in the fire anymore, but the smell of the smoke is still going to be on us until we get our glorified body. The sinful nature, we're going to struggle with it, and so it may be an overseer. I know pastors and ministers that are cynical and bitter and angry to this day because they were hurt by an official, someone that was in administration. Maybe they meant well and made promises they couldn't keep, or maybe, all overseers and people in administration, there are bad apples there. We all know that. Just like there's bad apples in the pulpit, and pastors, and bad apples in the pew. But I've known pastors that are cynical toward their denomination, or they've been hurt by a church board, or they've been hurt by a church. And so they're guarded, they're wounded, and they've never gotten over it. And so they have trouble loving. Maybe they have a poor image. And so when someone that maybe is more skilled than them, or has more money than them, or more advanced in life in general than them, they'll run them off from their church. I know of a pastor, a good man, but he had a rather wealthy man in his church who was a good, hardworking man that had earned every penny that he had, and he loved to give. Romans chapter 12, it talks about the gift of liberality, or the gift of giving. You give liberally if you have that gift. Well, this man had that gift, and you need a few heavy hitters in your church to underwrite financially the ministries of the church. But because of this pastor's woundedness, he ran him off. He said, I'm not going to let you control me with your money. Well, he wasn't trying to control him, but because he was wounded, he was guarded, he was cynical, he was quick to find fault. Now, when you're scarred, you've earned the right. It's the difference between a young man maybe is a little at disadvantage. He gets up and he talks about God's going to be with you. He's going to keep you through these tough times. Well, people know that's the truth. But when you get an older man that's got scars, that's been there, that's gone through the battles and has got the scars to prove it. And he tells you that God's going to be faithful. And he ministers. Let me tell you about the time when I was at the bottom and I failed and I stumbled, or someone hurt me, or I was lied to, or I was taken advantage of, but I took it to Jesus. I took it to the cross. And this scar here is proof that God healed it. And yes, it happened. And I can prove to you that it happened. I bore my cross, and it left stripes, it left scars, but I came through victorious. Well, when that older, wiser, scarred, seasoned veteran of the faith, when he tells you that God is going to be with you, when you can overcome, and he ministers through his scars, there's a world of difference that a minister ministering through his woundedness. And so, pastor, whether you're one of our NCR pastors, or you're a pastor somewhere else, or you're in a different area of life, but maybe your marriage is struggling. Your relationship with your children is struggling. Your relationship at work, in any area of your life, you're wounded. And so you're working and approaching life and ministry through woundedness instead of being healed. Today, if God is speaking to you, you've got to stop and say, Jesus, I'm going to let that go. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. There'll always be a scar there. And I'll be able to use that. The only time I'll talk about it is in a positive way when I'm ministering to someone else and say, I don't understand how you feel, but I can relate to how you feel because I got a scar to prove it. And let me tell you what God did. Let me tell you how God healed me, and he can do the same for you. There's a world of difference between ministering through our wounds and ministering through our scars. Woundedness is still alive today just as much as it happened back when it ever happened. Scarredness is saying it happened, and I've got the scar, but I've also got the healing. There's a world of difference. Now, I've been going for a few minutes. I don't want to go much longer here, but let me tell you something else. Last night here in Kalispell, I was reminded of another important lesson. We went around the table, and there's a couple here, the associate pastor, I think that's his official title, but he and his wife, Tony and Candy Schmidt, they're both mostly volunteer. There may be a small stipend for Sister Candy because of some of the book work she does. I don't know. I can't remember. But they're both volunteer. And I had Brother and Sister Hance and Brother and Sister McDuffie were here, two of our lead pastors. And we went around the table and just shared and called up with all the different ministers that were here. And they both, with tears in their eyes, talked about the impact that Tony and Candy Schmidt had in their life. And Brother Tony, as it came around, he was the last one to speak. And Brother Tony says, I've never had a problem. And he's an ordained minister. He's got credentials. And Sister Candy has credentials. They're both credentialed ministers in the Church of God. And he said, I've never had a problem being the man that was behind the man, to be the man that was supporting the man, to be the John the Baptist. As a pastor, I've had a lot of staff members, and it's been a good thing. But a lot of times, staff, you have to have staff to come in and help. The work is bigger than one man, and so you hire someone, but it's about their ministry. Of course, that's not a bad thing. But it's about their ministry. They're focused on what God's called them to do. But they're not always feel a sense of calling to you. And there's a rare individual, that John the Baptist, that says, hey, I must decrease and he must increase. That rare individual that says, everybody's fighting for the pastor's time, but very few people are fighting for the pastor. And that rare individual, like a Tony and Candy Schmidt, as I heard the stories about them last night, these two pastors and their wives, as they, with tears in their eyes, talked about how the Schmidts had impacted them. First of all, pastors, if you've got people like that, and it can be lay people, or it can be your staff, that they have a sense of calling to you, don't take them for granted. I forgot. They reminded me last night. It was humbling to me when I look back over my ministry, and in every church I was at, there were just honestly a handful of people, very few, that had a sense of calling to me. A lot of people, our people were good to us, but it was more of the relationship. They loved us because of what we did for them. And that's how it should be for the most part. We're there to serve. So this is not being speaking negatively, but you have to have those Aaron and Urs that help hold your hands up if the battle's going to be won. Those rare individuals that feel called to you. Don't take them for granted. Love them. Invest in them. Do not see those John the Baptists as a secondary ministry. That you've got the lead pastor and then you've got the second man. Sometimes the most important role and the toughest role is playing second violin. Everybody likes to play first violin. Everybody likes to be the man. But to be the man behind the man, to be the lady behind the first lady, that is a special person that should be honored with great honor. And this blog goes to a lot of different people. And maybe I'm speaking to someone here today and God's reminding you, maybe my ministry is about someone else's ministry. And when they win, I win. Be that John the Baptist. Be that voice crying in the wilderness that says, I'm okay with being the man behind the man, to being the lady behind the first lady. I'm okay with that because I'm doing it really and ultimately for the Lord Jesus Christ. The man, the first lady, they may have a congregation of tens and hundreds and thousands, but I've got a congregation of one, and I'm going to treat them like they're the most important congregation in the world, and that's my pastor. So anyway, I'm going to dedicate this blog to Tony and Candy Schmidt, two of our ministers out in Kalispell. Precious people. I've already knew that, but my respect for them increased greatly at this meeting. So anyway, I love all of you. My phone, I got it beating on my desk here, and my phone slipped a little. But anyway, I love all of you. Thank God for you. I pray that you have a great day tomorrow and over the next week. Remember those bosses. Work through those questions. I'll talk more about them as we go. But anyway, Pastor Mike, looking there, he's got his credentials on the wall, and he's even got some books. And man, your office looks better than mine, I think. It's a much better view back there. But I love all of you, and it's been a great joy to see so many of you over the last several days. And I'm going to be working my way down south in October. I'll have another trip at the end of September and October, and hopefully to get to see our districts, especially down in South Dakota. But I love you. Let's keep running to win, and I'll see you around the bend.